Welcome back to an episode of Babbles and Blunts, and today's discussion will be about if you should offer your kids up to God as a burnt sacrifice. Now, some people may say this is a no-brainer, and some people may say, hey, I will sacrifice my kid up to God if God asks me to. But today we're going to question a story in the Bible in Genesis where it talks about Abraham and Isaac. And we're going to get into Abraham and Isaac in the Bible, and we're going to talk about whether or not if you should sacrifice your kid up to God. So let's smoke this blunt and let's get into that, alright? Welcome back to an episode of Babbles and Blunts, and this is episode 4, and today we will be talking about if you should sacrifice your kids up to God or not, or if you should just leave it alone and say, God, I can't do that, and God is not something I can do, and God, I love you, but I can't sacrifice my kids up to you. But we want to go into the Bible and find out what the Bible has to say about sacrificing your kids up to God. So we're going to get into Isaac and Abraham's story, and we're going to find out the truth if you should sacrifice your kids up to God. So let's smoke this blunt one more time, and we're going to get into the scriptures and find out if you should sacrifice your kids up to God, alright? So let's smoke this blunt. Welcome back to Babbles and Blunts, and like I said, today's discussion is whether if you should sacrifice your kids up to God or not. So we're going to get into Genesis chapter 22 verse 6, and we're going to find out if you should offer your kids up to God or not. So let's read Genesis chapter 22 verse 6, and it says, And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it upon Isaac his son, and took the fire in his hand and a knife, and they went both of them together. And Isaac spoke unto Abraham his father, and said, My father. And he said, Here am I, my son. And he said, Behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? And Abraham said, My son, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering. So they went both of them together. And they came to a place where God had told both of them, where Abraham built an altar there and laid the wood in order and bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar upon the wood. And Abraham stretched forth his hand and took the knife to slay his son. And the angel of the Lord called out unto the heaven, out of the heavens, and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, Here am I. So there you have it. Abraham tried to sacrifice his son Isaac. Now, why did he try to do it? I guess he felt like that was the only considerable sacrifice that he had in mind at the time period. But we're going to get back into this blunt, and we're going to get into this story a little bit more, and we're going to tell y'all the outcome of this story and if Isaac was sacrificed or not. And as we have it right now, it doesn't seem like Isaac is going to be sacrificed, but you never know, because this is the Bible, and we smoking blunts. So let's get into the blunt right quick. Welcome back to an episode of Babbles and Blunts. And like I said, today's discussion is whether or not if you should offer your kids up to God as a burnt sacrifice. Now, like I said, offering your kid up to a burnt sacrifice will have to be a hard thing to do. But if God asks you to do it, would you do it? And in this situation, we got Abraham and Isaac. And Abraham is the father and Isaac the son. And Abraham is attempting to offer his son up as a burnt sacrifice. So here we have to talk about the idea if he's going to do it or not. If this is something God wants him to do or not. So we're going to get into Genesis chapter 22, verse 13. And we're going to talk about whether or not if Abraham is going to sacrifice his son or not, or is Isaac going to live and something else is going to get sacrificed. So let's find that out. Genesis chapter 22, verse 13. And it says, "And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked it, and behold, behind him a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered him up for a burnt offering instead of his son." So there you have it. Abraham did not sacrifice his son up as a burnt offering to the Lord. Now the thing is that Abraham was going to do it. Abraham was going to sacrifice his son up to the Lord as a burnt sacrifice. He was going to cut his neck and everything. He had the knife. And I guess if it was in more of a modern day time, he would have had a gun. He would have shot his son in the head, and then he would have offered him up as a burnt sacrifice up to the Lord. So you have to understand, in this situation, you shouldn't offer your kids up as a burnt sacrifice to the Lord. You should take a lamb. You should use a lamb, and the lamb should be appropriate for offering burnt sacrifices up to the Lord. Now the thing is, you can't eat this burnt sacrifice. You can't eat it. You just gotta burn it up for the Lord and let the Lord get it for himself. And this is real live burnt sacrifices in the Bible. So when people talk about do blood sacrifices exist, blood sacrifices definitely exist. And we're gonna talk about that during another episode. But this episode right here is out. And this is Bibles and Blunts, episode 4. And we're talking about whether or not if you should sacrifice your kids up to God as a burnt sacrifice. And the answer is no. And this is Bibles and Blunts. And we out, baby.